Well, hello everyone. It's Just Dwayne. Let's talk some gear. Well, today I thought we'd talk about my sleep system. My sleep system consists of a hammock, my insulation, my tarp, and that's pretty much everything that's included in my sleep system, except maybe my gear loft, my gear hammock that stores my gear when I'm sleeping. So I've covered the hammock and bug net and all that business in a separate video. I've covered my tarp in a separate video, and my gear hammock in a separate video. So pretty much what I'm going to focus on in this video is the insulation part of my sleep system. And because I sleep in a hammock, it presents some different challenges than you have when you're on the ground. You know, there's pluses and minuses in pretty much everything that we try to do. In the case of the hammock, because you're suspended above the ground and the wind can blow underneath the hammock, you tend to have to worry as much about the insulation below you, if not more, than the insulation above you. Unlike when you sleep on the ground, you sleep on a foam pad that provides a good bit of insulation, and there's no breeze between you and the ground, so you tend to stay warm enough with just a pad. So with hammocks, there's a couple of ways to handle it. One is to use a pad inside the hammock, and some folks do that. However, I don't find that to be the most comfortable method, nor the most trouble-free method. I prefer to use a top quilt and an under quilt. Essentially what that does for me is it's like taking a sleeping bag, cutting it in half, and using half of the sleeping bag above you where it can loft up like it normally does, and half of the under quilt is attached to the bottom of the hammock so that it provides the bottom half of the sleeping bag. And because it's hanging off of the sleeping bag, hanging off the hammock, it's not squished at all by your body weight, and it's able to expand and loft out and provide insulation underneath you. So you get the warmth of the sleeping bag all around you, but you still have the comfort of the hammock. It's not affected as it is when you use a foam pad. Okay, so I show you kind of how that looks in my hammock video. If you're not certain how an underquilt looks attached to a hammock, I encourage you to go to my hammock video where it shows you how my bug net's attached and the system I use to store everything. So I'm just going to kind of focus on talking about the underquilt, top quilt systems that I have and use. And I really have two sets of gear that I primarily use. I have a summer, a warmer weather, say to 60 degrees and above, 55, 60 degrees and above, and then 55, 50 and below, I use a different system. Whenever it's the colder time of year, I use a down-based system. I have a down underquilt and I have a down top quilt. Whenever it's warmer, I use an Insultech IX system where I have a Molly Mac Gear Shamu underquilt, which is made of Insultech, and I have a DIY top quilt that I made that's also made of Insultech. So I'm going to show you those different systems, kind of how they look with their attachments. And again, I show how it's attached in that hammock video, and I'll probably put out another video later that really gets into the details of how people install underquilts, if folks will find that helpful. So the first one that I have to show you is the Jacks Are Better. This is my winter, my colder weather underquilt. It's the Mount Washington 3. It weighs in at 21.2 ounces. And basically what we have is a rectangle of material. Okay? And this will then wrap around the underneath part of my hammock. So there's a couple different attachment points. On either end, it's got, on each of the corners, it's got these little Grosgain loops. And what I've done is replace the heavier shock cord that came with the system with some 3/32 shock cord, which is lighter. It's plenty strong enough. And you'll see that one leg, one side of the leg of the suspension is longer than the other. And that's because inside the hammock I lay on a diagonal. And since I lay on a diagonal, I don't want my underquilt to be perfect. I want my underquilt to also lay at an angle so that I get the most benefit from it. So because of that, it's laying this way. If this is the hammock, it's going to lay this way with me, so it's longer on one side, shorter on the other, and conversely on this other side you'll see it's shorter and longer. So it will actually lay more at an angle when it's installed. And then all I do is I take the ball of the gathered end hammock and stick it right through here like this, and then I just take this and fold it back over the ball a couple of times, and that's all there is to it. It sticks on both ends. I leave it on, as you'll see in my other video. I then use a hammock python, and everything's all in one big piece. The only other part of the installation is that where on the foot side and on the shoulder side, they have these little tabs AmJustDuane put on, and so I attached another piece of 30-32 shock cord with these little carabiners, and then I snap them over the ridge line. So you have this attached at the ends, and then you have this attached to the ridge line, and that snugs the whole underquilt tight up against the bottom of my hammock, and it serves to keep my back nice and warm. Now you also see that right now this doesn't look like a square, like a rectangular setup, and that's because it has these draw cords right here that you can tighten up, and there's one in the middle. Okay, and so what I've done is once it's installed, I then tightened this up and snugged it up so that it's totally snug against the bottom of the hammock, and that way drafts can't get down the end and get in between you and the insulation. So if you have it on and temperatures end up warmer than you expected, then all you need to do really is you kind of loosen this up and let those gaps happen, and then the wind will naturally kind of self-regulate the temperature of your underquilt. So that is my cold weather underquilt. Now I'll show you my cold weather top quilt. Okay, my cold weather top quilt is pretty identical to my cold weather underquilt. And the reason for that is because it's also a AmJustDuane. This is the AmJustDuane Hudson River top quilt, and it weighs in at 21.3 ounces. It's very similar to the underquilt in that if I open this all up and lay it out, it's almost the same dimensions. It has a grow gain loop in each of the corners. It just doesn't have the suspension on it. It cinches up top and bottom on the ends, just like my underquilt did. It doesn't have the opening in the center where I can finally adjust the underquilt. But this would be a fine underquilt. It would work just fine as an underquilt. Some things that they've added though to make it a functional top quilt is the addition of some Omni tape, which is just the Velcro where both sides are the male and female, so they're kind of snag free. That allows you to make a foot box. So let me kind of explain how that works. If you imagine a sleeping bag with the back removed, then that's what you're looking at with this top quilt. So you sleep in it where, you know, this you'd sleep underneath and this would be on top. And the only real challenge that you have, if you've ever slept with a blanket just in a regular bed, is when you go to pull it up, a lot of times, you know, it'll slide up and your feet will be uncovered. And your feet tend to get colder. So what they did was they designed what's called a foot box. It's a place for your feet to be completely encased like they are in a sleeping bag, but the rest of you just lays directly against the hammock. For those that do ultralight camping and backpacking, many of them use an underquilt as well. Ray Jardine's series of books talks about it and really kind of introduced the idea in a lot of ways. And basically the philosophy is that when you're laying on down, it's not providing any insulation anyhow, so why carry it? And so what he does is he sleeps on a foam pad, and we're just sleeping on an underquilt. So it's a similar phenomenon. The way this kind of foot box works is it has a little string here to keep it from unraveling when you step in it, because you know it's only a little bit of Omni tape. So you see it's just Omni tape on both sides, and then a channel at the bottom. And if you take the channel out, you'll see that it's really just a rectangle. So it gives you a lot of options. You can close this up, you can leave it open for venting, you can cinch that up as much as you want for venting. Another nice feature that I like that really wasn't available, didn't make itself available with this, is, like I said, it's got these loops on the corners. And so what I did was I inserted a snap on each of the top pieces, so that if I wanted, when it was cold, I just snapped the two ends together and it would make this loop. And then I could just simply pull the underquilt over my head, and then it really helps keep your shoulders warm. If you don't have some way of closing that off, you can get a lot of air infiltration. That looked good, huh? You can get a lot of air infiltration around your shoulders, and that can make you a lot cooler at night. So that is my winter top quilt. It's pretty identical, like I said, to my underquilt. It's down. I've had this system out to mid-20s, and I was plenty comfortable. I do wear, if it's cold, I wear a little hood. It's also a Jack's or Better hood. This comes in at, I believe, 2.5 ounces. Yep, 2.5 ounces. I did add a little snap here as well, so that it would snap on. And my wife likes to make fun of me because it's pretty good looking, but I will tell you that it's wonderfully warm. So when you're sleeping and it's colder, because you can't pull yourself into the mummy bag like you could with the sleeping bag, having the hood saves you a lot of heat. And then finally, I have a goose feet down pillow. This pillow weighs in at 1.8 ounces. I believe this is the size medium that he sells. So of course, it's down, and once I let the air out, it scrunches up to nothing. And lets me carry it very easily. But a lot of times when I'm sleeping in the hammock, I'll put this underneath my neck, and what that does is it keeps you from having your chin in your chest. It lets you kind of lay back some, and I find it to be comfortable. And it's also, because it's down, it's extra insulation for my head. So that's essentially my winter setup. So now I'll talk about my summer setup. Okay, well, here is my warm weather top quilt. Now this has kept me warm down into the upper 50s. It could probably go a little lower. I just haven't found the actual point where I start getting cold. What this is made out of one layer of Insultech IX, and then I have a 1.1 ripstop nylon outer and inner side, and then I sewed the individual pieces across so that I wouldn't get movement between the insulation and the outside of the quilt. And of course, it's in black and gold Steeler colors. And if you don't know, on the hammockforums.net, wonderful site for information and all you want to know about hammocks. I go by the name Hammock Steeler Nation. So, big Steeler fan. So I figured if you're going to make it, why not make it in Steeler colors? So, like I said, I'd love the Jack's or Better top quilt. I was just looking to save some weight. Like I said, the Jack's or Better Hudson River top quilt is 21.3 ounces. This, my DIY top quilt, comes in at 10.4 ounces. So I save 11 ounces by having my own top quilt, which is a good bit of savings. And when you consider that I also will then have a bug net and some other things, it allows me to stay pretty weight neutral throughout the year. Along the top, again, this is just a rectangle. It's ultimately a rectangle of Insultech. I did the same deal. I put the Omni tape foot box with the cinch. I used a much lighter weight cordage than in the Jack's or Better to save weight. And the same at the top. Another difference at the top, I used 1/16 shock cord instead of just line. And what that lets me do is I put snaps on the corner. See, it's just a rectangle. And then when I snap this in, I can put it over my head and see it snugs in nice. But since it's only 16th shock cord, it's so light. There's no choking feeling at all. And you can make it as loose as you want with the toggles to give yourself more room. So basically, I just took the exact kind of design that I liked in the Jacks Are Better top quilt, and I just made it out of one layer of Insultech to save myself a good bit of weight. And obviously, I don't need it to be that warm in the winter, or in the summer rather. So this has turned out kind of nice. I would say Insultech maybe feels a little bit clammy, but it really comes down to venting, and that's the beautiful thing about the top quilt. Is if you kind of wake up, you maybe feel a little bit clammy. If it's humid, you can just kind of flick it open and closed a couple of times, and it completely exchanges the air, and you're comfortable there. And again, I'll use the pillow, but probably not the hood. If I get colder in the summer months, then I'll just wear a like a fleece ski cap, watch cap kind of deal. So that's top quilt. I wanted to show you the top quilt right after the other one so you can see that the features are pretty identical. And finally, the last thing I'll talk about is my summer underquilt. Okay, well, the last thing I'm going to show you is the warmer weather underquilt. I say summer, but again, I live in Georgia, so that's a pretty flex. It really just comes down to what is the anticipated weather going to be. If it's going to be probably in the 50s or above, then I'll go with my summer rig. And if it's going to be 50s or below, then I'll go with the winter, the colder weather rig. And if it seems like there's a likelihood that it can, if I have to err on the side of caution, I'll go with the winter rig, particularly if I'm not going to need the bug vent. So that's kind of where that goes. This is the Molly Mac Gear Shamu underquilt. It functions almost identically to the way the Jacks Are Better underquilt works. It's essentially a big rectangle again. This one is a little bit shorter, but it's still a full-length underquilt. It does cover my whole body. I go with full length as opposed to 3/4. Essentially, just like in most things with lightweight kind of hiking, you can decide to go with a 3/4 length pad, a 2/3 length pad if you're sleeping on the ground, and some folks will then put a rucksack or some clothes underneath their feet to stay warm. Well, the same with hammocks. Some folks will use 2/3 length underquilts, 3/4 length underquilts, and trying to keep their shoulders to their butt or their thighs warm, and then they'll throw a little piece of foam pad underneath their feet. For me, because I kind of use that one continuous Python system to store it, the weight isn't, a couple of ounces to be able to sleep comfortably is worth it to me, and so I go with full length. It connects to the hammock the same way. You'll see I have the same kind of hookups, and they're kind of asymmetrical, just like the other one was, because they hang in an angle, just like I told you. The Molly Mac Gear Shamu underquilt did not come with the same tabs that my Jacks Are Better had, but I still like that I can. So what I did was I just sewed a couple little Grosgain tabs in the same locations as the Jacks Are Better, so that I could hook on my 3/32 shock cord with the little carabiners, and then they clip up over the ridge line. That way I could still pull this up as tightly as I do my down underquilt. And then because I believe they have them now, but mine didn't have them, a gathered end, so I sewed in a gathered end to the ends of my both ends of my quilt, and then I populated those with that same 1/16 shock cord. And it's super lightweight, but you see it pulls it up nice and snug up against the hammock. so that it stays nice and tight for me. So generally, like I said, I'll use this if it's going to be, 50s or above. I told you, there's kind of some flexibility there. If I was actually going to be about 50, I have another layer of Insultech that's got the little corners on it. So what I can do is I can choose to essentially add another layer of Insultech to this underquilt to add a little bit of warmth if I want it. And so the Molly Mack gear, the Shamu underquilt goes in about 11.5 ounces, and if I add the extra layer of Insultech, it's 3.2 ounces. So all told, nice light system. My summer system, I'm loving it. It gets me down to, like I said, about 11-pound base weight in the summertime. In the winter, when I add all the clothes and stuff, again, I get back to probably 16, 17 pounds. Just depends on how cold it's going to be. It can get, so it's somewhere in that range, because I have it's all components. I can swap out whatever I want. So hopefully that provides you information on my sleep system, the insulation primarily of the sleep system. The others are covered in other videos. Love to see what you're using. Love to see some videos or hear some comments on thoughts you might have on how I can improve my setup, or things I might want to consider. I think it's a great forum for that, and I look forward to hearing what you have to say. So thanks for coming along. Hope you enjoyed it, and look forward to seeing you again on the trail.